Imagine waking up in the middle of the night. You lie in the dark, your eyes adjusting to the silence around you. But something feels off. Your heart is racing, your breath shallow, as if there's a presence in the room that you can't quite name. It's not the typical fear, the kind of fear you feel when something external threatens you. No, this is something deeper, a quiet, internal force, a nagging feeling that has you questioning everything you know about yourself and your world. You're not sure what it is, but you can't shake the sensation that something is wrong. Your mind begins to race. What is it? What am I really afraid of? You lie still, listening to your own heartbeat, feeling the weight of the night press in around you. The question lingers. What am I afraid of? You feel the deep, unsettling tension of something unnamed, something invisible yet all-consuming. This fear doesn't have a clear form. It doesn't have a specific threat to point to. It's just there, woven into the fabric of your thoughts, your beliefs, and the choices you've made. It's a constant undercurrent, like the hum of an engine you don't hear until you stop and listen. You begin to wonder, how much of this fear has shaped my life? This question is uncomfortable because it challenges everything you've believed about yourself. Most of us think of fear as something that happens in moments of crisis or danger, but what if fear is much more subtle? What if fear is not just an occasional reaction, but the lens through which we see the world? This is the paradox. Fear is both a protector and a prison. It keeps us safe, or so we think, but at the same time, it limits us in ways we can't see. It convinces us that we need to play it safe, that the unknown is dangerous, and that failure is something to avoid at all costs. Fear holds us in place, but it also pushes us forward towards what we believe will keep us safe. But what if safety is not the goal? What if comfort is actually the enemy of growth? Think about it for a moment. How many of your decisions have been influenced by fear? How many of the choices you've made, whether in your career, relationships, or personal life, were driven by a desire to avoid discomfort? How many times have you turned away from an opportunity because you were afraid of failure, or rejected something because it felt too risky? And here's the deeper question. How much of your identity has been shaped by fear? Think of the beliefs you hold about yourself. Are they really yours? Or were they planted there by the fear of not being good enough, the fear of rejection, the fear of failure? Fear doesn't just impact what we do, it shapes who we are. It tells us what we can and cannot be, what we can and cannot achieve, who we are and who we are not. This realization stirs something unsettling in you. Could it be true that fear is the architect of your life? That the choices you've made, the path you've walked, have been determined not by your desires or your true potential, but by the silent, invisible hand of fear? Here's the truth that we rarely confront. Fear is not just an emotional reaction. It is a force that shapes our actions, our thoughts, our beliefs, and our perceptions. Fear does not just hold us back, it propels us in ways we don't realize. Every time we choose comfort over challenge, safety over risk, fear is quietly guiding our steps. But this isn't just a personal matter. The force of fear extends beyond the individual. Fear is woven into the very fabric of our culture, society, and institutions. From the media we consume to the values we hold, fear is constantly shaping the world around us, defining what we accept as normal, and influencing the choices we make on a collective level. So the question is this: what would happen if you stopped letting fear shape your reality? What if you could recognize the invisible threads of fear that run through every decision, every belief, and every interaction? Could you begin to reclaim your life from this quiet, pervasive force? The path to answering that question begins with understanding how fear operates, not just in moments of crisis, but as the underlying force that shapes our entire worldview. Fear isn't something you can simply ignore, wish away, or outrun. It's there, always lurking, always guiding you. But by understanding its roots, its power, and its influence, you can begin to see how it's shaped your life and start to unravel its grip on your reality. Fear is not just an emotion we experience in moments of danger or uncertainty. It's a pervasive force that shapes how we think, feel, and live. Its influence runs deeper than we realize, quietly influencing our decisions, beliefs, and identities. To understand how fear operates, we need to explore its psychological and philosophical roots. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, introduced the concept of the shadow. The shadow consists of the unconscious parts of ourselves that we repress because they make us uncomfortable. Fear plays a critical role in the creation of the shadow. Fear convinces us that certain aspects of our nature, our weaknesses, vulnerabilities, or darker impulses, are unacceptable. We suppress these traits, avoiding them because they challenge the identity we've built. However, the shadow doesn't disappear when we suppress it. Instead, it stays buried in our unconscious, influencing our behaviors in ways we may not recognize. We might make irrational decisions or engage in self-destructive patterns because the repressed aspects of ourselves are silently pulling the strings. Fear and repression go hand in hand. Until we face the shadow, acknowledging our fears and integrating them, we remain controlled by what we refuse to see. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher known for challenging conventional morality, believed that fear holds us back from becoming who we are truly meant to be. He saw fear as a force that binds us to society's expectations, preventing us from living authentically. Nietzsche referred to the herd mentality, where individuals conform to societal norms out of fear of rejection and judgment. This fear of standing out or challenging the status quo keeps us tied to a predictable and safe life. Nietzsche proposed the concept of the Übermensch, overman, a person who transcends societal fear and creates their own values. The Übermensch is not bound by the conventions of society. They embrace risk, uncertainty, and discomfort, rejecting the safe, fear-driven life of the herd. Nietzsche's philosophy urges us to confront fear directly, to challenge the limitations it imposes, and to embrace our freedom to live authentically. Arthur Schopenhauer, another philosopher who explored the human condition, believed that fear is a byproduct of the will to live, a fundamental drive that pushes us to avoid suffering and seek pleasure. According to Schopenhauer, this will is the root cause of much of human suffering. Our fears, whether they concern failure, death, or loss, are all tied to this insatiable drive to preserve our existence. Schopenhauer saw this fear-driven desire as a cycle we can never escape. No matter what we achieve, there is always more to fear. Fear of losing what we have or never attaining what we desire keeps us trapped in a cycle of longing and dissatisfaction. This existential fear, Schopenhauer argued, is the price we pay for living. It shapes how we perceive ourselves and the world around us, constantly driving us to seek safety and comfort. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, explored a different dimension of fear. Sartre argued that humans are condemned to be free. Unlike animals, humans must make choices, and this freedom is terrifying. The weight of creating our own meaning, without any inherent guide or certainty, creates an existential anxiety. This fear of freedom often leads people to avoid responsibility, retreating into comfort or relying on external structures, society, religion, or ideology, to guide them. For Sartre, this fear of absolute freedom limits us. It pushes us toward conformity, because we are afraid of the responsibility that comes with creating meaning in an uncertain world. The anxiety of having to choose our own path prevents us from embracing the possibilities that freedom offers. These psychological and philosophical insights reveal a profound truth. Fear is not merely an emotional response. It is a deep, often unconscious force that shapes our identity, our beliefs, and our reality. Fear drives us to suppress parts of ourselves, to conform to societal norms, to avoid discomfort, and to seek safety at all costs. It creates a sense of limitation and insecurity, preventing us from embracing our true potential. Understanding how fear works in our lives is the first step toward freeing ourselves from its grip. Whether we are avoiding our shadow, conforming to societal expectations, or clinging to comfort, fear is silently shaping our reality. The key to breaking free lies in acknowledging fear's influence and learning how to confront it. Only then can we begin to live authentically, without the constraints of fear limiting our potential. Fear is a master of disguise. It creeps into every corner of our lives, often unnoticed, quietly dictating how we think, act, and perceive the world. The consequences of this invisible force are not always immediately obvious. In fact, they are so deeply ingrained in our daily existence that we often fail to see how profoundly fear shapes our reality. But fear, when left unchecked, has a way of quietly influencing decisions, relationships, and even entire societies without us fully understanding its impact. Think about the decisions you make every day. How many of them are influenced by fear? Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, or even the fear of the unknown. These fears don't always manifest as outright anxiety. Sometimes they appear as quiet hesitations, rationalizations, or subconscious choices that guide us toward the safer path. We choose comfort over challenge, avoidance over confrontation, because the immediate fear of discomfort seems more real than the potential long-term consequences of stagnation. This subtle influence doesn't just affect personal choices, it shapes the very framework of our existence. The most troubling aspect of fear's influence is that it often goes unexamined. How many times have you found yourself stuck in a relationship, a job, or a routine simply because you feared the alternative? Fear convinces us that staying in our comfort zone is the safest option, even when we know deep down that we are not growing, that we are not truly living. We fear the unknown, fear the pain of change, and fear what might happen if we take that first step into the unfamiliar. This avoidance of discomfort, while providing temporary relief, is a trap. It keeps us in a cycle of inaction, constantly running from what we fear rather than confronting it. The consequence of this avoidance is not just stagnation, it's the quiet erosion of our potential. Every time we choose the safe route, we reinforce the belief that we are not capable of handling discomfort, that we are not strong enough to face what scares us. And in doing so, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to grow. On a larger scale, fear is woven into the very fabric of society. Cultural norms, media narratives, and social expectations all perpetuate fear in subtle ways. We are taught to fear failure, to fear standing out, and to fear making mistakes. Society rewards conformity and penalizes those who dare to be different. The fear of rejection, of not fitting in, keeps us tethered to the familiar, preventing us from challenging the status quo. This collective fear shapes the structures we live within. It influences politics, economics, and social relationships. Fear of the unknown leads to the perpetuation of outdated systems, while fear of change keeps entire generations from questioning the world they inhabit. People are conditioned to fear change itself, to view it as dangerous, even when it holds the potential for progress and transformation. In this way, fear not only holds individuals back, but also keeps entire societies stuck in cycles of stagnation and dysfunction. On a neurological level, fear also plays a role in how we perceive the world and make decisions. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing fear, often overrides the rational thinking of the prefrontal cortex. When we are confronted with fear, our brains are wired to react quickly, seeking safety rather than exploring new possibilities. This automatic response to fear can lead to poor decision-making. as we prioritize short-term security over long-term growth. Fear also has a way of distorting our sense of self. When we live in constant fear, we begin to define ourselves by what we are afraid of. We become trapped in a cycle of self-doubt, constantly questioning whether we are good enough, capable enough, or worthy of success. Fear makes us feel inadequate, and we start to measure our worth based on external validation rather than on our intrinsic value. In relationships, fear manifests as insecurity, jealousy, and distrust. We fear being vulnerable, afraid that if we reveal our true selves, we will be rejected or hurt. This fear of vulnerability creates barriers between us and others, preventing authentic connections. We live behind walls, unable to fully engage or embrace the beauty of real intimacy. Fear prevents us from being seen for who we truly are, and in turn, it prevents others from truly seeing us. But perhaps the most insidious consequence of fear is how it keeps us from living a fulfilled life. Fear convinces us that we are not enough, that we are not worthy of happiness, success, or love. We chase external achievements, seeking validation from others, all while ignoring the deep, internal work that is necessary to truly find peace and contentment. Fear keeps us distracted from what truly matters: our own growth, our own self-acceptance, and our own freedom. The consequences of living under the control of fear are far-reaching. Fear locks us into patterns of avoidance, stunts our growth, and keeps us from embracing the richness of life. It distorts our perceptions, feeds our insecurities, and keeps us trapped in a world of what-ifs and maybes. But the good news is that these consequences are not permanent. Once we recognize how fear is shaping our reality, we can begin to take conscious steps toward breaking free. The first step is acknowledging that fear is not the enemy. It is simply a force that needs to be understood and confronted. Fear is not meant to paralyze us. It is meant to teach us. Once we face it head-on, we can begin to break free from its grip and reclaim control over our lives. Fear is not something that simply disappears, no matter how much we wish it would. It doesn't vanish just because we ignore it or pretend it's not there. The real challenge, then, is not trying to eliminate fear, but learning how to live with it. This may sound counterintuitive, especially since we've been taught to avoid fear at all costs. But here's the truth. Fear, when embraced, can become a powerful force for personal transformation. It is only by confronting fear that we can break free from its grip. The first step in breaking free is understanding that fear is not inherently bad. We tend to think of fear as an enemy, something that holds us back from our true potential. But in reality, fear is a natural part of being human. It's a signal, not a barrier. It points to areas of our lives that need attention, growth, and healing. When we stop viewing fear as something to avoid and begin to see it as a teacher, it loses much of its power over us. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, spoke of something he called the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves that we suppress because they make us uncomfortable. These parts often contain aspects of our identity that we fear to acknowledge, like our insecurities, our darker impulses, and our vulnerabilities. Fear plays a critical role in the creation of the shadow. We suppress these aspects of ourselves because we're afraid of what they represent. But the key to freedom is not avoiding these parts of ourselves, but confronting them. Jung's idea of shadow work involves integrating the hidden parts of our psyche. This means facing our fears and acknowledging what we've been running from. It's not easy, and it can be uncomfortable, but it's through this process of integration that we regain control over our lives. Fear, in this sense, becomes a guide. It points us to the areas of our lives that need healing, helping us break free from the unconscious patterns that limit our potential. Friedrich Nietzsche, another thinker who explored the nature of fear, took this idea further. Nietzsche believed that fear keeps us tethered to the herd mentality. the societal norms and expectations that limit our freedom and creativity. The fear of judgment, the fear of standing out, keeps us from living authentically. Nietzsche argued that the path to greatness is through embracing the chaos of life and overcoming our fear of the unknown. For Nietzsche, fear is not something to be avoided, but something to be transcended. This is where the true rebellion begins. By confronting fear, we begin to take control of our own lives. We no longer allow fear to dictate our decisions. Instead, we choose to face it, to use it as a tool for growth. As we confront our fears, we realize that the things we once feared are often not as dangerous as they seemed. The more we confront fear, the less power it has over us. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, further expanded on this idea. Frankl's experiences in the concentration camps taught him that we cannot always control the external circumstances of our lives, but we can always control our response to them. He argued that the key to overcoming fear is to find meaning in it. Frankl believed that by choosing to find purpose in our suffering, we could transcend fear and live with greater freedom. Taking action in the face of fear is the next step in breaking free. It's easy to let fear paralyze us, to convince ourselves that we're not capable of handling the challenges ahead. But action, even in small steps, is the antidote to fear. Each time we take action, we weaken the grip of fear. It might start with a small risk, asking for a raise, having a difficult conversation, or doing something that scares us. But with each step, we begin to realize that fear is not as powerful as we once thought. However, action alone is not enough. We also need self-compassion. Fear can make us feel inadequate, like we're not brave enough or strong enough to face what lies ahead. But it's important to remember that fear is a natural part of the human experience. We must learn to treat ourselves with kindness, even when we feel afraid. This self-compassion allows us to move through fear without judgment and to understand that it's okay to be afraid. What matters is how we respond to it. In this rebellion, we learn to see fear not as an obstacle, but as a stepping stone. By facing our fears, we grow. We become stronger, more resilient, and more capable of living authentically. Fear, when embraced, becomes a tool for transformation. It helps us break free from the chains that bind us to the past and step into the future we were always meant to live. Breaking free from fear is not about eliminating it. It's about living with it, learning from it, and using it as a catalyst for growth. Fear no longer has to control us. It becomes a guide, leading us toward greater self-awareness, courage, and freedom. This is the true rebellion, the choice to live boldly, authentically, and without fear. Imagine, for a moment, that you are standing on the edge of a precipice, the wind whipping through your hair, the vast expanse of possibility stretching out before you. The ground beneath your feet feels unsteady, and fear rises within you. Your mind races with all the potential risks, the dangers that could await. But then something shifts within you, a realization, an insight. What if all these fears, all this uncertainty are simply illusions, products of your mind that you've mistaken for reality? What if, in truth, fear is not the force that limits you, but the key to unlocking your fullest potential? This is the final realization. Fear is not the enemy. It is the doorway. Up until this point, fear has been a shadow that loomed over your life, shaping your decisions, your beliefs, and your actions. It kept you safe, yes, but it also kept you trapped. It kept you from stepping into the unknown, from embracing change, from realizing your full potential. But now, at this precipice, you realize that fear has been your greatest teacher, the very force that has shown you the path to freedom. The ultimate truth about fear is that it does not define you. For so long, you may have thought that fear was an insurmountable barrier, a wall that separated you from the life you desired. But now you see, fear is simply a reflection of your own limits, the limits you've placed on yourself. the limits of your beliefs, and your understanding. Once you acknowledge this, once you realize that fear is a product of the mind, you can begin to dissolve its power over you. This realization is liberating, but it's also profoundly unsettling. It requires a radical shift in how you view yourself and the world around you. It means letting go of the need for safety and certainty and embracing the unknown with open arms. It means realizing that the very thing you feared most, the discomfort, the vulnerability, the risk, is the gateway to everything you have ever wanted. Take a moment to reflect. What would it look like to live a life free from the limitations of fear? What if, instead of shrinking away from uncertainty, you leaned into it? What if you stopped letting fear dictate your choices and instead started making decisions from a place of power, from a place of courage, from a place of authentic desire? This is the life that awaits you. A life where fear is no longer a prison, but a tool. A life where you are free to create, to explore, to fail, to grow. A life where you can walk through the fire of fear and come out stronger on the other side. But this doesn't happen all at once. It is a process, a continuous journey of awakening. Each time you face a fear, each time you step into the unknown, you are rewriting the story of your life. You are proving to yourself that fear does not control you, that you are the master of your own fate. As you move forward, you'll encounter new fears, new challenges. But now you know that these fears are not walls to be avoided. They are opportunities to break through. Each fear you face is a new chance to grow, to expand, to become more fully who you are meant to be. This is the beauty of fear. It doesn't stop you. It propels you. It forces you to confront yourself, to evolve, and to create the life you truly desire. The most powerful realization is that the walls you've built to protect yourself from fear were never as solid as they seemed. Fear, once recognized and embraced, becomes a source of strength. It becomes the fire that fuels your transformation. As you step forward into the unknown, you realize that fear was never the enemy. It was always the doorway to the life you were meant to live. So the question now becomes, will you continue to hide from fear? Or will you step through the doorway and embrace the unknown? Will you keep living in the shadows? Or will you break free into the full light of your potential? The choice is yours. Fear, in all its forms, is waiting to guide you. Step forward. Step into your power.